This is you sitting in a gray concrete room in East Berlin, one light overhead, one chair across from you, and a man who hasn't slept in 4 days. The room is small, maybe 3 meters by 4. The walls are bare concrete. The floor is concrete. The light is a single bulb, no shade. There's a table, there's your chair, there's his, that's everything. No window, no clock. He doesn't know if it's morning or night. You do. He doesn't know how long he's been here. You do. He doesn't know what you know. That's the point. His name is Werner. He's a 34-year-old school teacher from Leipzig. He attended a meeting. He passed a pamphlet to someone. He said something he shouldn't have said to someone he thought he could trust. He was wrong. He's been in this building for 96 hours. He's been given water, small amounts of food, just enough. His chair is slightly shorter than yours. That's not an accident. Nothing in this room is an accident. The year is 1982. East Germany. The German Democratic Republic, population 16 million. The Ministry for State Security, the Stasi, employs 90,000 full-time officers. It has 180,000 informants, one for every 63 citizens. The Stasi is the most comprehensive surveillance apparatus ever built. The KGB called it the best. That's not a small claim. They watched everything. Letters, phone calls, workplaces, churches, schools. They watched bedrooms. They opened mail with steam and resealed it the same day. They collected scent samples from suspects' clothing and stored them in sealed jars in case dogs were needed later. Jars of smell. That's how far this went. Other secret police arrested people, imprisoned them, made them disappear. The Stasi did something different. They studied how to destroy a person from the inside. No marks, no martyrs. Just a man who slowly stopped functioning, who lost his job, his relationships, his sense of reality, who friends stopped trusting, who seemed unstable, paranoid, difficult, who fell apart quietly in private without anyone understanding why. That's what you do. That's your job. Werner is looking at the table. His hands are folded. He's trying to look calm. He's not calm. You can see it in the way he breathes. You've seen it before. You know exactly where this goes. You have his file. You have his letters. You have the name of the friend who handed him over. You don't need to touch him. You didn't stumble into this job. You applied for it. There was a form. You filled it out. You submitted it through the proper channels like anyone else applying to a government ministry. No dramatic recruitment. No late-night approach in a parking garage. Just paperwork. You studied law at a party-approved university in Leipzig or Jena. Maybe criminology. The curriculum was predictable. Marxist theory. State security doctrine. The ideological framework came first. Always first. You were a good student. You believed what they told you, or you were smart enough to act like you did. By your second year, there was no difference. The MFS, the Ministerium für Staatssicherheit, was the largest employer of its kind in history. By the 1980s, 90,000 full-time staff, 180,000 registered informants. One informant for every 63 citizens in East Germany. It wasn't a shadow organization. It was a bureaucracy. It had HR departments, performance reviews, pension plans. You went through training at the Stasi's own college in Potsdam, the JHS, Juristische Hochschule. It looked like a university. It functioned like one too. Classes, exams, grades. Your instructors wore civilian clothes. They spoke carefully. No shouting, no dramatics. That wasn't the style. You didn't learn how to hit people. That's not what they wanted from you. They wanted something more precise. They taught you psychology, how people think, how people break, how fear works differently than pain. Pain makes people angry. Fear makes people cooperative. That was the lesson. You wrote it in your notes. You learned about pressure points, not physical ones. A man's job, his wife, his children, his reputation in the neighborhood, his belief in himself as a decent person. Everyone has something they won't risk. Your job was to find it. They had a word for the method, Zersetzung, decomposition. The idea was simple. You didn't need to arrest someone to destroy them. Arrest was loud. Arrest made martyrs. Decomposition was quiet. You worked on a person from the outside in, slowly, methodically, like water getting into concrete. You waited for the cracks. Your colleagues were ordinary people. Teachers' sons, factory workers' daughters. They dressed plainly. They commuted to work. They ate lunch in the cafeteria. Some were ideological. Some were just employed. Most were both, at least at first. You believed you were protecting something. The state, socialism, the future. The language was always about protection. That was what they called it. Protecting citizens from destabilizing elements. Protecting the party from enemies. You used that language long enough that it stopped feeling like language. It just felt like fact. The training lasted 2 years. Then they assigned you to a department. You got a desk. You got files. You got a supervisor who nodded when you did well and said nothing when you didn't. That was approval. That was the job. The goal was never to punish people. It was to make them stop being people. Before the room, before the chair, before you ever meet a target face to face, there is the other work. It has a name. Zersetzung. Decomposition. The Stasi didn't invent the idea, but they perfected it. They turned it into a science, a methodology, a manual. Directive 1/76 laid out the framework in clinical detail. How to dismantle a person. How to do it without leaving marks. How to make them destroy themselves while you watched from a distance. Here's how it works. The target comes home. Everything looks the same. The dishes are where they left them. The books are on the shelf. But one book is slightly out of order. A chair is 2 inches from where it was. The shampoo bottle has been swapped for one almost identical. Not identical. Almost. They notice something feels wrong. They can't explain what. They tell their wife. She doesn't see it. They tell a friend. The friend doesn't see it either. They start checking the apartment every time they come home. They start keeping logs, writing down where they put things. They look paranoid. They feel paranoid. That's the point. Anonymous letters go out. One to the employer, something vague, a concern, a rumor, nothing actionable. The employer files it away but remembers it. One to the spouse, a suggestion that something is wrong, that there are things they don't know. The marriage gets cold. Questions come up, answers don't. Another letter goes to a close friend implying the target said something about them. The friend pulls away. The target notices the distance and doesn't understand it. Their world gets smaller, quieter, more hostile. They didn't do anything. Nothing happened to them. No arrest, no charge, no trial. Just a slow erosion of every relationship that held them together. This was considered more effective than prison. Think about why. A prisoner can write from a cell, can be interviewed, can become a symbol. People rally around prisoners. They become martyrs. A person who seems unstable and paranoid gets dismissed. Their complaints sound like symptoms. Their accusations sound like delusion. They can stand in the middle of a room and tell you exactly what's happening to them, and you'll worry about their mental health. That's the design. There was a writer. His name isn't the point. He was working on something. Essays, manuscripts, work that made the state uncomfortable. Agents entered his apartment. Not to take the manuscripts, to damage them, to rearrange pages, delete sections, alter drafts. Not destroy everything, just enough. He'd come back to his work and something would be wrong. A chapter missing, an argument altered. He started doubting himself, his process, his memory. He stopped writing. They never charged him with anything. They didn't need to. There was a scientist. His colleagues began receiving information about him, carefully placed, carefully worded, that his research methods were questionable, that he'd behaved inappropriately at a conference, that a colleague had concerns. None of it was true. All of it was documented, filed, sourced from nowhere. Colleagues grew distant, collaborations ended, grant applications came back denied. He was professionally isolated without a single official action taken against him. No record, no charges. Just a man watching his career dissolve and not understanding why. You weren't always the one doing this. There were teams, specialists, agents assigned specifically to Zersetzung operations, but you knew about it. You understood the architecture. You understood that by the time a target made it to your room, they had usually already been through months of this, sometimes years. The arrest itself was almost a relief for some of them. Finally, something concrete. Finally, something real to push against. Just a thing that had happened to them that they could name. But naming it didn't undo it. The relationships were gone. The credibility was gone. The sense of a stable reality was gone. What you got in that chair was the remainder. A person who had been slowly taken apart piece by piece before you ever picked up your pen. By the time they sat across from you, most of them were already broken. The man sitting across from you didn't end up in that chair by accident. Someone put him there. Someone who knew him. Someone he trusted. That's how the system worked. Not through luck, not through random sweeps, through people, thousands of them, hundreds of thousands. By 1989, the Stasi had files on 6 million people. East Germany had 16 million citizens total. Think about that number. More than a third of the country was documented, catalogued, watched. And the watching wasn't done by agents in trench coats. It was done by neighbors, co-workers, pastors, spouses. The Stasi called them inoffiziell Mitarbeiter, unofficial collaborators. The name made it sound civic, helpful, like reporting a pothole. You weren't betraying anyone. You were just being a responsible citizen. That's what they told people. Most of them believed it or found a way to. Recruitment worked several ways. Ideology first. True believers who thought they were protecting socialism from enemies within. Then money. Small payments. Favors. A better apartment. A promotion that wouldn't have come otherwise. Then coercion. The Stasi found something on you. A Western relative you'd been writing to. A joke you told at work. A church you attended. They didn't arrest you. They sat across from you and explained your options. You could cooperate or things could become very difficult. Most people cooperated. You couldn't blame them, not entirely. There was a school teacher in Leipzig. She filed reports on her students' families for 11 years. Which parents made comments about the government. Which households had visitors who stayed too long. Which children repeated things at school they shouldn't have heard at home. She didn't think of herself as dangerous. She thought she was doing her job. Those families never knew. Their children never knew. The information went into files, and the files went into the machine, and eventually some of those parents ended up in rooms exactly like yours. There was a dissident in Dresden. He spent years writing samizdat, passing it through a small network of people he trusted completely. His wife knew what he was doing. She supported him, she said. She told him to be careful. She also filed reports twice a month. Every contact he mentioned, every meeting, every name. She had been recruited 4 years before they married. By the time he was arrested, her file on him ran to hundreds of pages. He didn't know until 1992. The marriage didn't survive the week. That wasn't unusual. When the wall fell and the files opened, people learned things. A pastor discovered 3 members of his congregation had been reporting on his sermons. A factory foreman found out his closest friend, the man who stood at his wedding, had been an informant for 9 years. Friendships dissolved overnight. Families fractured. Some people refused to look at their files at all. They said they'd rather not know. You understood that. The network didn't stop destroying lives when the Stasi did. The damage was already built into the relationships, into the trust that wasn't there anymore, into the questions people couldn't stop asking. Who knew? Who told them? How long? The informants mostly moved on. New jobs, new cities, ordinary lives. Some of them never told anyone what they'd done. Some of them told themselves it hadn't mattered, that the information they passed along was harmless, that nothing bad came of it. Some of them are still finding out today. You open the folder. You already know what's inside. That's the point. You've read this file 3 times before you walked into the room. You know his name, his address, his work history. You know his daughter's school. You know his mother lives in Karl Marxstadt and that she's unwell. You know about the letter he sent to a contact in West Berlin in March. You know about the meeting in the church basement on the 14th. You know about the friend, the one he thinks is loyal. You set the folder on the table. You don't open it yet. You let him look at it. Silence is a tool. You learned that early. Most people can't hold silence. They fill it. They explain themselves. They volunteer things you didn't ask for. You wait. You pour water into 2 cups. You push one toward him. You don't say anything. You watch him decide whether to drink it. Then you begin. You don't accuse. You don't raise your voice. You recite. March 11th, you say. The letter. You name the contact in the West. You describe the envelope. You get the details right because you have them all. His face does something. That thing faces do when a person realizes the walls aren't where they thought they were. You keep going. The church on Prenzlauer Berg, the 14th of last month, a Thursday. You name 2 other men who were in that basement. You describe what was said. Not everything, just enough. Resistance at this point is theoretical. He knows it. You know it. The question isn't whether he's been observed. The question is what happens next. You let that sit. You were trained to identify the pressure point before you entered the room. Every person has one. The training was specific about this. You don't guess. You read the file and you find it. For some people, it's the job. A factory foreman who loses his position, loses his housing, his status, his identity. For some, it's a child, a teenager with ambitions, a university application pending, a future that can be made complicated with a single notation in the right file. For some, it's the aging parent who depends on them. The sick mother in Karl Marxstadt who needs her medication, her housing allocation, her access to care. You already know which one applies here. You don't lead with it. You build toward it slowly. You explain the situation in administrative language. There are concerns. There are questions. There is a process. The process can go in different directions. You slide a single sheet of paper across the table. You don't call it what it is. You call it a formality, a clarification, a way to clear this up and move forward. Many people sign it. They don't fully understand what they've signed. They understand that signing ends the immediate pressure and that not signing extends it indefinitely. That calculation is enough for most people. Some resist longer. Some cite legal rights they technically have and practically don't. You don't argue. You nod. You make a note. You tell him you'll give him time to think. You stand up. You leave the room for 20 minutes. You get coffee. You let the room work on him. The single light, the chair, the silence, the folder still sitting there. You return. You sit down. You ask if he's ready to talk. No yelling. No threats that sound like threats. No dramatics. Just the slow, patient pressure of a system that has already decided the outcome and is simply waiting for him to arrive at it too. This is what the training produced. Not brutality, efficiency. You were not breaking bones. You were dismantling will, cartilage by cartilage. The technical term in your training materials was operativer Vorgang. Operational process. The language kept it procedural, kept you procedural. By the end, he talks. They almost always talk. Sometimes it's small things. Sometimes it's everything. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they go very still and quiet and sign the form without looking at you. You don't react either way. You write down what they told you, close the folder, and stand up. You take the tram home. Same route every evening, same stops. You keep your eyes on the headlines. You blend in with every other civil servant heading back to his family. Tired. Ordinary. Nobody looks twice, that's the point. Your apartment is on a good block. MFS housing. The building is newer than most in the district. The hallways don't smell. The elevator works. Your refrigerator has things in it that other people wait in line for. Meat twice a week. Good coffee. The state takes care of its own. You have a car. You have a dacha 2 hours outside the city where your kids run around on weekends. Your wife planted tomatoes last summer. They came up well. She knows you work for the ministry, that's enough. She has never asked for more than that. Not because she's afraid, because she understands how things work. You come home, you eat dinner, you ask the kids about school, you fix a leaking pipe on Saturday morning. You are a husband, you are a father, the other thing stays at the office. That compartment has to be airtight. You practiced it the same way you practiced everything else. A file closes, you walk out of the building, the tram comes. By the time you reach your stop, you are someone else. Some men were very good at this. They coached their children's football teams on Saturdays, they remembered anniversaries, they laughed at jokes. Completely normal. 5 days a week they sat across from people and methodically took them apart. Then they went home and slept fine. Others didn't manage it as cleanly. You knew which ones. The drinkers gave themselves away slowly. A bottle in the desk drawer. Shaking hands by Thursday afternoon. Some requested transfers to administrative work. Document review. Filing. Anything without a chair across from it. Some just got quieter over the years. Their wives noticed. They didn't explain. You told yourself what everyone in that building told themselves. The state needs protecting. There are real threats. The work is necessary. Someone has to do it. You believed it at first without trying. Later you chose to keep believing it, which is a different thing. You didn't examine that difference too closely. What stayed with you was the power. Not violence, not fear, knowledge. You knew things about people that they didn't know you knew. You knew which marriages were failing, which debts were hidden, which friendships were fragile. Walking through the city, you saw everyone differently. The woman at the bakery, the man reading at the bus stop. You knew how thin the walls were around any life. That knowledge doesn't leave you at the office. It comes home on the tram. It sits at the dinner table. It watches your children sleep. You pour a drink and watch television and don't think about the room. On the night of November 9th, 1989, you watch the news like everyone else. The crowds at the checkpoints, the guards stepping aside, people climbing the wall with hammers. You sit in your apartment and you don't say anything. Your wife watches next to you. Neither of you speaks. You know what this means. She might not. You do. By morning it's real. The wall is open. Within days the crowds turn toward Normanenstrasse, Stasi headquarters. People pour through the gates. They want the files. They want to know what was written about them, who wrote it, how long it went on. The shredding starts before they get through the doors. Every machine running. Bags of strips piling up in hallways. You hear about it through colleagues who are still there, still trying. They destroy roughly 5 million documents before citizens physically stop the machines. 5 million. And still what's left fills 111 kilometers of shelving. There wasn't enough time. There was never going to be enough time. The restoration project comes later. Germans sit at tables with bags of torn paper strips and reassemble them by hand. Page by page, fragment by fragment. Eventually computers help. Millions of pieces patiently put back together. The records you assumed were gone start reappearing. Names, dates, reports you signed. It takes decades. Some of it isn't finished yet. What happens to you? Not much. That's the honest answer. Most interrogators are never charged. The courts try a few. The prosecutions are narrow, technical, slow. Erich Milke, who ran the entire ministry for 30 years, goes to trial. They don't convict him for running the Stasi. They convict him for a murder he committed in 1931. 58 years earlier. That's what sticks. Not the files, not the rooms, not the Zersetzung campaigns or the broken families or the careers destroyed on purpose. A street shooting from before most of his victims were born. Your colleagues scatter. Some retire quietly with their pensions intact. Some move to small towns where nobody knows their names. Some change their names entirely. A few find work in private security, one sells insurance, another drives a taxi. They become ordinary, neighbors, pensioners, men who complain about their knees at the pharmacy. You still know what you did. The man who couldn't sleep in that chair across from you. The woman who signed the form because she had a daughter and didn't see another way. The files you added to. page by careful page, building a case that wasn't really a case. It was just a life, documented until it collapsed. The state that employed you doesn't exist anymore. The ministry is gone. The building is a museum now. People pay to walk through the interrogation rooms and read the placards. The files are still there. In 1992, the files opened. 111 kilometers of documents. Shelves and shelves of paper. You could request your own file. Thousands did. They sat down and read. They found their neighbor's name, their pastor's name, their spouse's name. Some files ran 200 pages, some ran 400, entire lives documented, every letter noted, every meeting logged, every phone call. You read it and you understand exactly how it worked, not because someone explained it, because it's all there in careful handwriting, organized by date. The psychological weight of that, reading your own surveillance, broke people who had already survived everything else. They'd made it through the state. They hadn't made it through the paperwork. The perpetrators mostly walked away. A few trials, thin convictions. Most collected their pensions, moved to smaller towns, got ordinary jobs, insurance, retail. Some kept their real names. Your colleagues became people no one suspected of anything because there was nothing left to suspect them of. The system ended. They just continued. The files were the only thing that remembered what actually happened. And here is the thing that stays with you. Not the interrogations, not the Zersetzung campaigns, not the informants. It's the scale of ordinary participation. 90,000 employees, 180,000 informants, secretaries and school teachers and engineers and fathers, people who came home for dinner, people who believed they were necessary, people who did the paperwork. Every system that asks ordinary people to hold power over other ordinary people runs on the same logic. The necessity of it, the small justifications, the folder in front of you, the pen, the form. You signed it. So did they. The man in that chair across from you had a file too somewhere, and so did you.